This session is going to be on quarterly activity reports. If you attended the session last time, this will be the same material. So you only need to attend one of the two sessions. So if you've already attended, you do not need to attend today. This is not a series. We also have the recording from last time, which includes different questions as well. So we can be sharing that after today's session. So first of all, I just want to welcome all of you to year 2 of our vaccine community outreach grant. For some of you, you've been with us for a year or more now, and for others of you are new to the team. This information is relevant to all of you. Some of you have been doing quarterly activity reporting with us in the past. But there's a few new elements this year, including a new survey link that we'll be asking you to use. So it's important for everybody to get this information. We'll be talking about reporting just generally, why we do it, and how we look at it in this grant. I'll be sharing more about the Department of Health Services reporting requirements. We'll go through some of the year 1 results from our subawardees and some of the lessons we learned from activity reporting in the first year. My goal is to make this time that you spend on reporting as efficient as possible, and I've got some insights that will help us with that. I'm going to share a tour of the updated form, and then we'll talk about next steps. So to start today, I want you to think about why you are in the position that you're in professionally, sort of big picture, what drew you to this field, and share your why in the chat. My guess is if you're involved in vaccine community outreach, there's something about helping people reach their full potential by sharing resources, offering programs, forming partnerships, strengthening communities, or maybe solving challenging problems. Or maybe you have a reason you'd like to share today. Would anybody be willing to either verbally or in the chat share sort of what it is that drives you to be in your position?
I apologize. I would be happy to share. I was holding an infant a second ago. So I couldn't chat. I'll just go ahead and share real quick.
Okay.
I'm a parish nurse at a church in Milwaukee, and I love just being a part of the community and definitely trying to find solutions to some really difficult issues. And I feel like Wisconsin health literacy is a really important, like the stuff that you guys are trying to do in general is really important, especially to the community that I serve.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. Can I get one more volunteer?
I'll share. Good afternoon. I love the fact that we're strengthening communities. I love the fact that we're making sure that communities are being aware of what's going on, and we're like feet bringing things to people, not so much as they have to come through and get through difficult systems, but that if we can curtail the systems and some barriers, then I'm willing to partner and help that happen. So that's my passion.
Perfect. I see I have a lot of doppelgangers today. Something must happen with the Zoom link. So there's a lot of Aaron Augustins out there, and I love it. I thought I was the only one. Any other final thoughts about why you're in your role? Or, if you don't feel comfortable sharing with the group, kind of ask yourself this question and hold it in your mind. My goal today is really to help you think about reporting and evaluation, maybe in a new way. I'm going to admit a couple more people here. So sometimes what I hear is and maybe an old thought that I'm hoping to replace today, is that taking time to collect and share data takes me away from serving my community. I think for those of us that have a heart for this work, it's really that in-person, face-to-face work that often feels the most meaningful and the most impactful. But I want to capture a new thought or suggest a new thought, which is that collecting data is planning time, and that it helps you make a greater impact on your community over time. So whatever that reason is that you're holding in your head or you shared with the group today, I want you to kind of think about how reporting can help support that goal and make you even more impactful. I know for myself, when you get into the heart of a project and you're really in an activity-based space and you're going, it's really hard to think about how can I kind of step back and take the time to go through the data or to reflect on what's happened so far. But I find that every time that I do take that time, I have a new insight. I think of a way I could be more efficient, more impactful with my work. And so sitting down and having that regular space to think about what's happening and to make adjustments, I believe can really help make a greater impact on whatever that why is that you identified. One of our volunteers spoke to this. You're a trusted messenger. You carry trust, ideas, relationships, resources, data, and insights. This is really the work of this grant. It's the reason why you are all here. If one type of message worked for all people across the state, we might have a different picture of how people are viewing COVID, and the vaccination equity would be increased, and we would have a little bit more of an even playing field across the state. But what is needed in this situation, because information, people don't want information all in the same ways. They don't want it coming from people that are outside of their circle of experience. This is really the heart of the grant, that you're a trusted messenger. And when we talk about a trusted messenger, we are often really emphasizing the part where you're taking information, maybe it's health or science information, and you're bringing it to the community and they trust you with that information. And that's certainly the heart of this work. But I want you to think about the fact that you're also a trusted messenger sort of back as we communicate with larger institutions like the Department of Health Services, as you communicate with us at the state office and we make decisions about how to shape our grant going forward and where to allocate funding and staff time and resources. We really trust you to bring those insights back to us, and then we bring them back in return to the Department of Health Services. So remember that the trust and the data and the insights kind of can hopefully go both ways. And I really think if you're spending all this time and effort and you're close to the people that you serve, there's so much that you know and see and collect that is really impactful and could impact not just your community, but other communities across the state. Here's just a little graphic of a project life cycle. So we often really love the exciting sort of like design and development phase where we think of all the great ideas that we want to implement. And I think many of you are at that phase. in your work with the VCO grant, especially if this is your first year. And then we move into implement, which is where we do want to spend the most of our time implementing and doing the work. But I want to invite you to make sure that you're also closing the loop and evaluating and analyzing the data. The good thing about this grant is that really this life cycle is built into the way that we operate. So we do ask that you do quarterly activity reporting. So that's every 3 months, you're kind of closing this loop in a smaller way. And then at the end of the grant, we'll be asking you to kind of reflect more comprehensively over what's happened over this year. So as you undertake this activity reporting activity, it can really help you strengthen your organization. And that is one of our goals at Wisconsin Health Literacy, is to help strengthen your organization, not just to be able to do the work before us today, but to be able to do work in the future that might go beyond this grant or this specific funding opportunity. So your VCO specialists are trained to help you, support you in that work. And going through that process within your own teams internally can help you really clarify your goals, hold your team accountable for goals that you've set. It allows you to learn from mistakes, build upon successes, improve your programs and services. And ultimately, the way that you evaluate can influence policy and funding decisions. So one way that I see this happening is that we now have 31 community-based organizations. And what I do at the state level is I compile all of your responses to quarterly activity reports. And if I notice that, hey, 5 or 6 or 7 groups are kind of telling me a similar message, I definitely pay attention to that. I report on that. And I think even if it's challenges that we're encountering, especially with COVID, there's a lot of barriers and challenges and feedback that we get from the community. When I hear themes coming up again and again, I definitely share that with the Department of Health Services. And my hope is that this would, it might be a little bit less quick at times than we would hope in terms of how policy and funding decisions get made. But I do ultimately think that when we share this information, it can help shape the future of how we do public health in Wisconsin. Also, being organized and collecting this data along the way can help you secure future funding. So if you're completing the survey that we're asking you to do and keeping records, this might be data that you can use to secure funding in the future beyond this grant. So now I want to just get a little more specific with the Department of Health Services reporting requirements. The Vaccine Community Outreach Grant is, at Wisconsin Health Literacy, we do not get funding from them, and we cannot give funding to you unless we are completing our own set of requirements. So all the requirements that you have to do expense reporting and to do activity reporting feed into our state office, and then we create a cumulative report. And so a lot of what we're asking you is coming from what we've agreed to do through this grant. So the report that we produce at a state level includes total activities. And so activities are actions that support your work plan, total reach, which is the number of people served, and then insights. So these are opportunities you've identified, so promising strategies that you feel positively influence people's understanding of COVID prevention strategies, and vaccination opportunities, and also barriers. So things that you're identifying as barriers for the communities that you serve. And again, when I see multiple groups or even just a handful of groups reporting on similar themes, I definitely take notice of that. So it might feel that your responses don't have impact, but they really do. These are the upcoming due dates for the VCO quarterly report. Our next report is due October 15th, and this would capture your activities from July, August, and September. And then 3 months later, January 15th, 2024. This is coming fairly quickly off of the holiday season. So you might want to, if you have some pre-holiday activities, compile that data as much as possible before the holidays. Then we have April 15th. And then our final report is due May 15th, 2024. And the end of the grant is June 30th, 2024. If you, within your work plan, have activities planned in May and June of next year, we want to work with you on that. And we want to create a plan to just make sure that we can wrap up the grant prior to June 30th. So I know, for example, that at least one group has a Juneteenth event planned where they're planning to incorporate COVID-19 education into a Juneteenth event. If it's something you've planned ahead for, and we can create a schedule for you to complete all your requirements, we are willing to definitely work with you on that. When you complete your quarterly report, please, 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 if you remember nothing from this session, please complete it via the survey link. We will send you that link after today's session. Your VCOs will always have it on hand. As we send reminders to you throughout the year, we'll include that survey link. Sometimes I do get data in as an attachment, an email, PDF, or Word document, and this really adds a lot of difficulty, and it's really hard to kind of compare across different sites when I'm getting information in multiple different ways. It's a little bit more to track, just to make sure that I have everything and things aren't lost in email. So I'm really asking to use that survey link as your, what qualifies you as having submitted your quarterly activity report. All right, so now let's dig a little bit into definitions. When we say activities, what we mean for the purposes of this report is education and outreach activities. So it's really the heart of the grant of getting out there and sharing COVID-19 messages. So examples would be creating a flyer, hosting a community event, posting on social media, creating a video, or developing an advertising campaign. So on the right here, I have a little example of a social media post that was published on one of our groups last year's social media page. Just a simple message: let's get vaccinated, a QR code with information on where to get that vaccine or to sign up. So it can be as simple as that, and that would count as one activity. When you report activities to us, they should support your work plan. So the original proposal that you submitted to us, it should be related to that. It should align with the grant purpose, so COVID-19 outreach and education. As we move into this second year of the grant, we understand that the world has changed and that people are opting less often into sort of COVID headline events. And you all are having to get creative about how you add COVID-19 messaging to existing events and activities. We just ask that you make it clear what that connection is, because sometimes we get information and it's just difficult to tell from the outside, like how did this relate to COVID? So you do have that flexibility, but you have to kind of make that connection for us. And then your education and outreach activities should reach the target population you originally defined in your proposal. For the purposes of activity reporting, report when activities are complete. So the quarterly activity reports capture outreach and activities, educational activities that are completed and delivered to the community. So do not add planning activities to the quarterly report. That's a little different than what you're doing for like your timesheet and expense reporting form, because planning time for your staff, that's certainly a necessary part of this project life cycle, and your time, if it was budgeted as such, should be reimbursed for that. But for activities, we want to know, like, once you got to the end of something, whether even if it's a small something, like as small as a social media post, it gets confusing when people are reporting at all stages in the project cycle. And I'm not sure if this is a new item or it's something that you've been working on for a while. So we want to make sure just when it's complete. The next definition and thing I am hoping to emphasize today is just your reach. How many people did you reach? So if you attended how many people attended an educational event that you hosted, how many people were reached with a social media post, how many received a flyer you distributed, viewed an advertising campaign, or connected with you one-on-one. So again, this is what DHS is asking of us, and then we in turn are asking of you. All right, so when I am packing for a trip, I'm gonna just take a little analogy break with you. One of the things that you often kind of on the surface think, okay, I just need to pack my bag. That should be maybe a 15-minute task to pack my bag. But what I usually find is that when I start to pack my bag, I realize that there's other tasks I need to do. So what my to-do list actually looks like is, oh, I need to pack my bag. Now I want to do some laundry because I need clean clothes to pack. I might want to clean out my refrigerator so I don't come back to things that are stinky and rotten. I'm going to contact schools to let them know my children will be out. I might need a prescription on that trip. So now I'm headed to the pharmacy. And suddenly I'm rushing around, mail hold, taking out the garbage, watering plants. The list can kind of go on. And what should have been maybe a 15-minute task now turns into a couple hours of me rushing around, and I should learn, but this is sort of the way that I have done it. When we are doing activity reporting, I sort of see the same thing going on with our partners. And I'm sort of want to invite you to think about, how do we do this a little at a time? Because if you're tracking activities as you go and you're kind of keeping up with things, then it should be more of a administrative submit, spend 15 minutes thing at the end. But I think what makes it feel more difficult for folks is that if they're not keeping up with it, it's actually less efficient to kind of go back and try to retrace your steps and try to get the numbers, moving backwards. So one of the things that we've done to hopefully help you out is we've developed a new tracking sheet that you can use. I'll give you more details on that really soon, and I'll show you what it looks like. The tracking sheet is optional. We're all going to have different needs. You can adapt the sheet that I've given you. You can create your own system. It does not matter, but it's just a little help, hopefully, for you to be able to track it as you go. The tracking sheet, again, does not replace the form. We still need you to finally submit via the link. But we're hoping that if you have that tracking sheet sort of up to date, then you can just quickly copy and paste it into that link when the due date comes along. We also invite you to meet with your VCO specialist monthly with any questions or concerns. So again, instead of waiting until the day before the link is due with questions, I mean, we're certainly willing to help you because those situations definitely happen. But when possible, I think you'll get a lot more time and attention if you can sort of talk that through as you go. I'm giving you this tour today, but I know that once you really get into it for yourself, you might have new questions that you didn't anticipate. Try to meet with your VCO specialist, clear up any questions or concerns so that when that due date comes it's just data entry, and then you don't need to panic. And it feels a little less grueling to do it. Now I'm happy to kind of share some year one results. We had 20 community partners last year, And I want to give you a sense of really when each group reports what that results in. So in year one, here were our activities and reach numbers. So to date, our sub-awardees conducted 3,727 activities and reaching more than 1.5 million people in Wisconsin. So you can see how all of our efforts really add up. And I'm hopeful that with now a group of 31 in the coming year, we're going to see even larger numbers. I'm also optimistic because I think that this number is an underestimate. There's times when, for those of you that were in year one, we didn't have numbers attached to the results that you shared, so we weren't able to report them. So I've kind of sifted through all the details of the submissions, and I know that there's stuff out there that we just weren't able to report because we didn't have a number. Successful strategies. These are some of the insights that we learned from our partners in the last year. So what strategies have you found to be successful in improving vaccination? For you, this is just a check mark, but you can see again, it adds up and paints a bigger picture for us. Number one was respectful communication, followed by trusted messengers. And then community events was the third most successful strategy. We also had fairly high numbers for partnerships, social media, flyers, and workshops and trainings. For those of you that are in your first year, I think these insights are really helpful, and you can kind of piggyback off of what we've learned in this first year and really dig into some of these strategies that others have found to be successful. Then within the report, we get sort of these open-ended responses. And so these are some of the opportunities that people have shared with us. And I'm just giving you this as an example of things that I like to see that are really helpful, that lead to insights that go beyond the numbers. So in individual and small group sessions, people are more willing to listen to what's being presented, ask appropriate questions, and rethink their decision to receive the COVID-19 vaccine. So this was an example of a theme that I heard many times over the last year. When we first started the grant, I think there was, the way it was conceptualized was that it was going to be a lot more like larger group, more like classroom style learning happening. That wasn't the only idea, but as we went on, we kept getting feedback from all directions, from our vaccine outreach specialists, from our partners, that these individual and small group sessions were really working well, that people were more willing to dig into the reasons they were getting vaccinated or not. And we were getting better insights and better conversations in this way. And we were actually able to, advocate with DHS and make some adjustments to our original grant because we had this great feedback. So it does matter. It does impact how we move forward. Another quote was, one barrier is feeling that vaccines are not effective at preventing COVID-19, or that COVID-19 no longer could cause them serious harm. And I put this under opportunity because it sort of like gives us insight into what is preventing people from acting, and how can we frame messaging around this barrier. A little bit more on barriers and challenges. We asked our sub-awardees in the last year, what barriers and challenges has the community encountered to vaccination? Number one has been misinformation and disinformation. Number two is public health mistrust. Number three is health literacy. And the next few are digital skills, internet access, transportation, and language barriers. And again, these barriers that have been identified in year one, I'm hopeful that we can kind of continue to build on this and dig in on project activities that address these barriers. Some more quotes that our sub-awardees shared on barriers. COVID fatigue is an issue, although COVID still exists and is impacting the community. Individuals appeared to have checked out of staying alert and being informed. And then specific concerns were often heard from women, particularly those that were or could become pregnant. They fear that the vaccine will interfere with fertility. I am hearing a little bit of feedback. If folks could mute. Thank you. And then here are some lessons learned from just the process of collecting data in year one. And this is really from my standpoint of having gone through the data and worked with groups to collect data. The number one thing I would recommend is to keep it simple. Your activity report does not need to be formal. So it doesn't have to be written like a grant application or even necessarily a polished piece of prose. Bullet points and straightforward language are really okay with me, as long as it's clear and I know what you're trying to convey. I don't want you to spend your time necessarily on wordsmithing, but rather on being clear and sharing the most important data. So that's my second data point, is focus on key data. So accurate counts and a few quality stories are all that are really needed. I'll often get quite a bit of information that's not that, and I feel bad that people are spending time on those. So I want to help you see that just really focusing in on the few key pieces of information we need is really all that's needed. The other insight is to count what you can. I definitely understand that the most meaningful work you're doing is probably not easily measured. A lot of what you're doing is trust and human, and there's not necessarily a number attached to that. However, just from my insights of reading through data, if you do complete an activity that can be counted, please do count it. So an example is I would get a really wonderful write-up about a flyer that was created with a lot of description of what's in the flyer, but I wouldn't necessarily get an information about how many people did you share that with. So if it is something that's countable, like a number of events, number of materials, number of social media posts, just add the number to that. And again, if you're using the tracking form along the way, that should help. And then obviously make sure that your activities align with the grant. Again, be clear. If it's not clearly like this is a COVID event, make sure that you're explaining what the connection is with COVID-19 community outreach. Now I'm going to share an example. This didn't exactly come from any group, but it's kind of an example of something that I would have gotten. So here's an example. We created a series of flyers and distributed them to our students once or twice per month. And then we'd get maybe a lot of detailed demographic information. Students are aged 18 to 24 in certain zip codes. So first I want to talk about what's missing in this example. The number one thing I'm thinking is, how many flyers did you create? You said you created a series. And then you said you distributed them to our students. So my next question is, how many students? And then when you said you had this series of flyers, did the flyers address COVID-19 or were they about something completely different? It's not obvious from this statement. And then also, it's not necessary in every situation, but when possible, stories, insights, or feedback about what happened as a result of that activity is really useful. Now I want to talk about what's not needed in this example. Detailed demographic data is not needed if the activity reaches the population you defined in your original proposal. So I know all of you, to be part of this grant, had to really dig into who your population is and what the need was. And if you're here, we know that that's a population that is a priority and that we want to work with. So unless you're differing from that, you don't have to basically reiterate that in each activity report. It's sort of implied that that's the group that you're working with. I am going to pause here and see if there are questions at this time before we go into sort of the how-to of submitting. You're welcome to questions in the chat or just jump in if you'd like.
I have a question that goes back to the dates. So it goes back a bit. Just so really, if we are finished with all of our activities by May 15th, then we are finished with our reporting period, or is there some reporting that's due in June, like a total, like overall report on June 30th? Or
that's what the May 15th one is, but we've been having discussions. We're still kind of working out because there are some groups, obviously, if you have planned activities in June, we want you to do those activities. It's just that there's going to be a process of, you know, collecting the data, reporting the data, getting your reimbursements in, and we can't pay you beyond June 30th. So it's more of an encouragement, I would say, at this point than a hard and fast deadline, because you can have an adjustment made to that schedule, but you kind of have to agree that like then you can get all those other pieces done by June 30th. So yeah, it's more like if you complete activities, then you can report on them and then you can ask for reimbursement, and then we can make sure. One of the things that we'll be emphasizing throughout the year is that we cannot pay you beyond June 30th for activities that occur beyond June 30th. And so we'll be continuously communicating about that, and obviously to be able to meet those deadlines, we'd like you to front load them. So again, there are groups that, you know, have a Juneteenth event, for example. So we just need to kind of work out with them, okay, how are we going to quickly turn that over and make sure that they get paid for that work, first of all, and then that we are able to capture what actually occurred through the activity reporting. So that's where I think I would work with your VCO specialist if you want to have a different schedule. And it's also an invitation to really think about just the grant overall to the degree possible. You know, this fall is obviously a great time as we prepare for winter, back to school and all these things. Like, as much as you can do this fall is great. And we'll be kind of encouraging you throughout the year to not wait till sort of the end of the grant period to complete the majority of your activities, unless, again, there's a compelling reason or a community activity that is really compelling for next June. And I apologize for the little bit of a squishy nature of that answer, as we've just been, you know, we're kind of planning ahead for the coming year and trying to work that through. So I think it's like, it's not a hard and fast, but we want to make sure we know that each time we have a deadline, there's a little bit of, sometimes we're not meeting those deadlines perfectly. So we kind of trying to allow for just making sure that we can complete everything by June 30th. Other questions?
I guess I have one more, and
Okay.
I'm just kind of double checking. So if we get negative feedback, you want that negative feedback as much as you want positive feedback.
Yes. I think that's really a big part of this grant. It's because if there's sort of this, you know, like in mainstream media messaging, we know it's not capturing everything that's going on out there. And we do really want the insights, because I think that helps with the public health community overall. It helps us with our grant. I think it's compelling to talk about why it's not working just as much as why it is working. Because if there are barriers, then even in a positive sense, like acknowledging, okay, here's a barrier, then now let's craft a response that really takes into account that barrier, that speaks to that specific reason, or that maybe, you know, something like transportation is an issue. Okay, let's work on that topic. So I think that's really integral to like making this work really meaningful, is staying on top of the barriers as much as, you know, the things that are really working successfully. And we did see that over the last year as well, is like a lot changed. You know, it went from like people being really hungry for COVID-19 information to being people like wanting to move on and tune out. And now we're sort of in that space. And I think increasingly that's going to be important, because there are still health impacts, significant health impacts of COVID out there. And, you know, it is important that people still hear these messages and know what to do, and what the risks are to them. And so if we're understanding like what those barriers are, then we can craft, you know, messages or responses that are not ignoring those reasons. I think it also, you know, it speaks to like, okay, this grant we go through next June, but vaccination is really an important part of public health. And a lot of the reasons I've worked on vaccine projects in the past, like flu vaccines and other things, like a lot of the reasons we're seeing now why people don't want to get vaccinated are the same reasons like 10 years ago when I was working on flu vaccines. And it's still important information that can, you know, that's kind of why I say, you know, you feed that back to DHS. Even if we're not talking specifically about COVID-19 vaccines, we're learning like, how does the community view vaccination in general? What are the reasons that are compelling for folks? What are the reasons that make people hesitant? I think that has a bigger public health implication than just COVID vaccination. Other questions? All right. So now let's look, I want to share an example of like, this would be something I would be excited to receive. Here's an example, and I just revised that example to how I like to see it. I'm hoping you see that this is not overly long and it's still fairly simple. We created 3 flyers addressing the following topics: COVID-19 symptoms, COVID-19 risk factors, and COVID-19 vaccination clinic. So now I can see easily you created 3 flyers. That's 3 activities. It's clearly connected to the grant when you share the topics. And then you share the total number that you distributed. So we distributed them to 325 total students in the past 3 months. So you're reporting on the number that you reached within that 3-month period you're reporting on. Now we're getting a little bit of insight about the response to that activity. Again, this isn't required, but it's really, really nice and useful and helpful. Our students shared that they liked the easy to read format. They also liked being able to interact one-on-one with the instructor. And then we have sort of a bigger reflection, which is many still have concerns about the safety of the COVID-19 vaccine. They've heard of friends and family who had a bad reaction. Again, I made this one up, but this is the type of thing I like to see. Simple, we did this, it reached this many people, and then what happened as a result. All right, now I want to share with you the form that I've been speaking about. And feel free to jump in if there's anything that you want to ask about as I go through that. If you're with us last year, we had more of an open-ended form, and this year we'll be asking basically for the same information, but in a little bit different way that I hope will make things easier for you and quicker for you. So we have main categories, and all you're doing is checking yes or no in a form. And then if you check yes, you'll get more detailed questions about that. And if you check no, you just move on to the next category. And I'll show you what I mean really soon. So the main categories that we've seen are print materials that you created, a flyer, a handout, or curricula. videos. 3 is community events, health fairs, or classes. 4 is social media. 5 is advertising campaigns. And then any other project idea that you have that doesn't fit within these other categories, you can report as other projects. I've suggested these first 5 to you because most of what we've seen in the last year has fit those categories, but it's certainly not required. You can definitely incorporate a novel project idea. So when you click yes, the question expands for more detail. The questions are a bit different for each different category. So based on your work plan and the things you know you want to do, after today, I would encourage you to click through the form and really get comfortable with the questions you're going to be asked for that category. But very broadly, we're looking for activities. How many did you do? Total reach, how many people did you reach? And then a little bit more inside of what's the purpose of the activity, who was the audience, and then any insights and case studies. For those of you who have been with us, we have not asked for examples of your work in the past. This will be added this year. It's optional. You can upload examples for, if you've created a flyer, or you can add a link to something you've created. It's perfectly okay to answer no in a category. So we expect that you'll be sharing detailed outcomes for maybe 1, 2, or 3 categories at most, rather than answering yes to all categories. So don't feel bad answering no. That's sort of how this is designed, to breeze you past the questions that don't apply to you. And I'm hopeful that that would reduce the time to complete the form. Okay, so now I'm going to give you a tour. And again, feel free to stop me if you have questions along the way. So year 2, you should, if you've used a link in the past, it will be a new link. And it should look like this. And you'll select Start Now. I'm going to have to do it a little bit different way to be able to share with all of you. One second. All right, can you see the form? All right. So the first thing you'll do, this first screen is just about. So you'll just select the date the report is due. So we have, again, the same due dates. October 15th would be when you report on the period of July to September. January 15th, the period of October to December, and so on. So you just select the time period you're reporting on. You're going to include your organization's name, your name and title, and your email address. If you are filling this out just to kind of see what the questions are, these are required. You can just type in test, 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 and that's fine with me. Just don't hit submit at the very end. So you can basically put test text in there, and I won't see it unless you hit submit at the very, very end. So just test, test, test if you want to just kind of review. Okay, now we're into the categories. The first category is print materials, and you're just checking yes or no. So did you create any new print materials this quarter? If the answer is no, you just hit next. You get videos. No, you hit next. Community events, health fairs, or classes. No, you hit next. Social media, and so on. Now I'm going to show you what happens if you did have something to report. So say you did do a print, you created a print material like a flyer or a handout this quarter. The next question is the total that you created. This one says a value must be a number, so you can only type a number into this. The total number of copies you distributed. And then this is just open-ended text. What's the audience for the material? What's the purpose? And again, For audience, you can be fairly concise with this, especially if it's really aligning with your original proposal. And then this one is optional. You can upload a file to share examples, or you can copy and paste a link into one of these boxes. And then once you complete that, you will hit next and it will go on to the next question. I'm just gonna check no, so I don't have to type in all the forms. Here's an example for videos. Again, the total number of videos, the total reach or the total views, again, audience, purpose, and examples.
I have a question about videos.
Yes.
What if we don't create the video? Like you guys made a really good video at the end of this last year.
Yeah.
And what if we use that for like some feedback or events or something like that? How would we?
I would probably do like total number of videos. I think I would count it and just explain it in here, said like we used a video that was already created and here's the purpose. So I think I would just, a lot of these open-ended boxes are the opportunity to explain things. I was just thinking through if you would want to report that as a number, because I think that's still an activity. Say you have a community viewing of a video. Maybe I would report that as a community event. I'm changing my mind because that's more of like a viewing situation. If you're posting something on social media, you would report it on there. I'm trying to think of like when you would I think this is when I'm creating an original video, because I'm trying to think of, is there a time when you would like use our video but it wouldn't be shared at either an event or on social media? I think if that were the case, you could put it in here and just explain. But I'm looking at this more as like a new thing, a new like product that you've created. I'm going to spend a little more time on community events, health fairs, or classes. This is a pretty broad category, and most of what I see actually fits into this category. So it could be, a health fair. It could be you are hosting an ESL class and you're adding COVID-19 information to it. You're having a community holiday celebration. All of those things would count as long as you're adding some COVID-19 educational information and sharing it at that event. So number 8 is a total number of events. So if this is just a health fair, that number would be 1. But sometimes I see people doing a series that's basically just repeating the same idea 5 times. You could just put, the number of events, 3 or 5 or whatever. The next question is the total number of people reached with COVID-19 vaccine and or digital literacy information for all events this quarter. So I'm asking you to tell me like, what's the total number of people that you reached? So if you had 5, well, here's the example. If you planned 3 events, each attended by 30 people, report a total of 90 people. The other thing I want to share is that sometimes there are large events occurring and you're not reaching everybody at that event with COVID-19 information. What we really want to know is the number of people that you reached with COVID-19 information. So if you had a health fair and 200 people came to the health fair overall, but 20 of them attended your breakout session on COVID-19, you would report a number of 20. But on the other side of things, we've seen it where maybe there's 200 people at an event. They all listen to a keynote speaker say some messaging about COVID, and they got some COVID-19 information in their welcome packet that went to all of them. In that case, you would report the full number of attendees of the event. But sometimes where I do see an error is where people will just report like there were this many people at the event and they're not really thinking through like, were all those people reached with COVID-19 information? You'll add again the audience at the event, the purpose of the event, and sort of like how COVID-19 vaccine education outreach was incorporated. That's a new question this year, just because again, people aren't necessarily planning as many events that are really like COVID is the headline topic. It's more often that there's a community event happening and people are getting creative about how to add that messaging to the event. So we're asking you to just explain what that tie-in is. Also new this year is that we're asking for you to check the box about what educational topics you addressed. So you can check one or more boxes here. So if you're talking about what is a virus, what is COVID-19, vaccines for kids, whatever the case may be, you can check one or more boxes here. If none of these categories really fits for you, you can type into the other, but this is the list we've come up with based on all the work we've done so far of the common topics that do fit well within the grant that we've gotten. Another new topic is digital literacy. We're asking again this year if you did do any digital literacy education to report that here. Digital literacy is not a requirement, so you can always select none if that wasn't a topic. But sometimes, you know, as we were talking about vaccination, things come up like, okay, how do I scan a QR code? How do I install or uninstall an app? So if you are, whether it's in a one-on-one setting or in a small or large group setting, if you're helping people through some of these the digital literacy skills that connect and relate to vaccination, add that here. And then if you wish, we would love to see some event photos that show how COVID-19 was incorporated into the event. If photos are taken at a private venue, you must provide photo release forms, and we're asking you to upload those as one PDF so that we can see that you've thought through that step, because sometimes we get photos and we're not sure if the people in the photo have been notified that those photos might be used. So we want to make sure we have that documented. Social media is the evaluation of that can be a little bit more complicated for folks. We're trying to ask for really as simple of metrics as we can. But one thing I want to highlight is that fairly soon we're going to be sending out an opportunity to you all to participate in a social media training series this fall. The opportunity includes both a sort of general intro to social media, which would include not just you know, the theory of how to post and how to get engagement, but also the evaluation part of it. But there's also, for some groups that want to opt into it, an opportunity to work with an outside consulting group to really look at your own situation and enhance your social media strategy. And that would include technical support around how to evaluate. So I just wanted to highlight that opportunity. For those that don't participate, that's okay. We're just asking for things like the total number of posts this quarter, the purpose and topic of the post. So again, if you have a Facebook page and you're posting about, you know, 10 different topics, we just want to know the number of times you posted about COVID-19 or COVID-19 vaccines. We're asking what platforms you use. So again, you can check more than one or just one. If there's something that isn't on here, you can add that here. Social media engagement. We're asking for the total number of likes, comments, or shares for all COVID-19 related posts. And then for social media reach, the total number of unique people who viewed your COVID-19 post this quarter. And then it shares in Facebook where you can find this information. Again, you can get really, really sophisticated with social media metrics. We're hoping that you'll just do sort of higher level. We also, for those of you, if you have social media really as a large part of your work plan, I invite you to, work with your VCO and try to figure out the best way to evaluate the data that you're trying to look at. But for quarterly reports, it's fairly high level. For other projects, we just want to know what the project is and the purpose and the audience. Here we're asking how many unique activities were part of this project, and we define an activity as a project element that has either a unique audience and or a unique purpose. So one example is if you develop 3 classes with their own curricula, that would count as 3 activities. Or if you created a flyer and you shared it in one way with one audience and in another way with another audience, but it's the same flyer, I would count that as a separate activity as well. And then again, we want to know how many people did you reach with this activity for all the efforts that you described. So that's the last section of the activities. Again, then for everybody, once you get to the end, everybody's going to be asked these questions about insights. So again, the data that we saw earlier, the strategies that you found to be successful, we want to hear like what you're seeing. Is it respectful communication, social media, workshops, trainings? You can check one more or all of these. Please share a COVID-19 success story from this quarter. I don't want you to overthink this. It can be a really small win or an insight or one person who had an aha moment, that kind of thing. If it's bigger than that, that's great too. Report on barriers or challenges you've encountered. And then this is a place for description of that. And then the last 2 questions are just sort of placeholders for anything else you want to share with us. If there's resources you'd like to do your work better, or any other questions, comments, or concerns. And then you just select submit, and then that comes to us, and that's all you have to do. Again, if you're moving through this as a test basis, you can do everything I just did up until don't hit submit, or that will come through, and I'll think it's your real data. Questions at this point? All right. I am past my time limit here, and I apologize for that. I'm going to wrap up with just a few final comments. We have a tracking tool that we've developed, and I'll send that along with you all. Sorry, my computer likes to freeze up when I do things that I'm just going to leave it in this format. We have a tracking tool. This is in Word document. We'll send it along so you can kind of look at it more carefully. I'll zoom into a close-up of it. Again, it's just to help you track. You do not submit this form, you submit via the link. We have a reminder about the due dates. And then note that the tracking sheet is not comprehensive. So all the questions on the other form couldn't be captured perfectly on this, but it's just kind of helping you think about, okay, you can add the date here. There's a pick list. That's one thing you should know, to pick, what category of work you're doing. You can list the activity name, total number of activities, total reach, audience purpose. This can expand as needed based on how many notes you want to take. You can print this off and, hand write and jot, if you're racing from event to event, you can write your notes on here, and then that's your resource you can use to submit the form later. if you want to make adjustments to this for your own purposes or use a spreadsheet or any other system, that's perfectly fine. We just wanted to help you a little bit so you didn't have to recreate the wheel. So we have space for up to 10 different activities on here. Again, you're not expected to do a particular number. It's all going to be unique to each situation. Will it let me go now? Yes, it will. All right, so let's review your next steps. I want you to review the survey link and just kind of go through and familiarize yourself with it and make sure you don't have any questions before our next due date. And review the detailed questions that will be relevant to your work plan so you know what you're supposed to be tracking. Track data as you go, schedule time on your calendar. I would recommend weekly just to do a small check-in to make sure you're not missing anything. I find it's really a lot easier to do that on a Friday than to try to click back 3 months on my calendar and figure out what I did. I have been there, so I understand, but we want to try to avoid that to the degree possible. Meet with your VCO specialist to address questions or concerns on a monthly basis, and then obviously submit the survey via the link according to the schedule. So that is all I had on the agenda for you today. I would love to stay and answer questions. I know some people might need to drop off, but if anyone wants to talk through things with me, I'm happy to answer questions. And then after today, once you go through or when you're preparing your first quarterly activity report, we are all more than willing to answer your questions, to be available, get some time on the calendar if we need to kind of go through your individual situation and help you out. So contact your VCO specialist, or you may contact me as well. So thank you all for your time today. Feel free to drop off if it's needed for time purposes. Otherwise, happy to answer questions. I see maybe some in the chat. Okay, no questions. And then I will hopefully get you these slides and the video and recording and all the forms by tomorrow. No questions? I didn't confuse anybody? Yeah, I mean, this is one of those that, you know, once you get into your own situation, things will come up. So please keep in touch, try to pack your bag as you go. And it hopefully won't be any surprises once October comes. All right, thank you so much for your time and attention today. I will stop the recording now, but I'll stay on just a minute in case anybody has things they want to share.